add my thanks to the others that have been expressed here for arranging this evening. This is the first meeting in the West that, I mean, outside of Europe, where this book is being featured. My wife and I were in Paris at the beginning of October for the book launch of the French version of the book, which is a clone of the English. In fact, the same text is on the same number of pages. It's almost a tour de force of printing feat. Same pictures, same text on the very same number of pages, just a different cover. And it was a wonderful experience. It was attended by members of the press, by ambassadors, cultural attachés of various embassies, and a number of us who made contributions to the book spoke on a panel much like this. The book has been selling unusually briskly, as much as 100 to 200 copies per day, and that's France, which is rather smaller than the United States. And the reviews have been very positive. With one singular exception, some people who are very disturbed by the fact that it tells a story that they don't like to tell. Because the story that they like to tell is the story of persecution, Muslim anti-Semitism, historical suffering of the Jews, and an Arab Holocaust around the corner. This book makes an attempt, and I think very successfully, to strike a balance between partisan approaches on either side. And the contributors include Americans, Jews and non-Jews, Europeans, French people, Muslims, Muslim French people, Muslims from the Arab world. All of these people are contributing to this book, and Israelis, of course, as well, I shouldn't forget. So it's truly representative of a cross-section of scholars. But it is new in the sense that it tries to avoid partisanship, tries to avoid siding with one side or the other. That doesn't mean that people who are rigidly committed to a very extreme point of view won't find this book controversial. But controversy sells books, and I hope that it will do the same thing here. I want to say, so by the way, the book that was mentioned before, under Crescent and Cross, I mentioned to a couple of people here, the first foreign translation of that book was into Turkish in 1997. The book appeared in 1994. So I consider that to be a very significant and symbolic thing about the book. There are a number of things that I could talk about, but I decided while I was sitting here that I would talk about the issue of Muslim anti-Semitism, because it's very much on people's minds, especially Israelis, especially Jews living in the diaspora, because this anti-Semitism that exists in the Muslim world is quite frightening in many respects, both in the kinds of things that are said and in the iconographic images that are used in the form of cartoons, etc. Looks very much like the anti-Semitism that we know, unfortunately, from Germany in the middle of the 20th century. And one of my essays in this book is about Muslim anti-Semitism, and the subtitle is Muslim anti-Semitism, Old or New? Is it old or is it new? Some people think that it's very old. That goes all the way back to the Quran, 14 centuries of Islamic anti-Semitism, its roots in Islamic traditional literature, and for that reason, because it's so deeply and heavily rooted in Islam, it's ineradicable in the sense that it cannot be uprooted. It's there, and so there's nothing to be done but to grin and bear it. It won't get better. Anti-Semitism has been around for a long time. It's very difficult to defeat it. That's a dominant view of many people, but it's incorrect. It's incorrect because while the Quran and other early Islamic literature expresses often unfriendly views about the Jews and also about the Christians, that is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a very specific thing. It is an irrational belief in the diabolical Jew who, for instance, kills Christian children, uses the blood for medicinal purposes, and in its modern 19th century form, racist, and a belief that the Jews are attempting to overturn the Christian world and the world in general to supplant it, a kind of a conspiracy theory. Those kinds of views do not exist in classical Islamic texts. Anti-Semitism that exists in the Muslim world today, and it's very important to understand this contextually, is an import. It came into the Muslim world in the 19th century on the heels of colonialism. European colonial powers, obviously Christian colonial powers, brought Western-type Christian anti-Semitism into the Muslim world. This kind of anti-Semitism grew as the struggle between Arab nationalism and Jewish nationalism came to the fore. It became exacerbated in the 20th century as the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel seemed to be looming in the near future, and it has become extremely serious since the establishment of the State of Israel and the ongoing Israeli occupation, and it has become Islamized. What do I mean by that? Whereas this kind of anti-Semitism comes from the West, Muslims have sought to make it their own by citing Islamic texts which express a view of the Jews which is similar to the views expressed in Western Christian anti-Semitism. The problem that they have is that there are very few classical Arabic texts that fit the mold. Very few. And so they use the same ones over and over again. Nonetheless, it seems like anti-Semitism is indigenous, genetic in the Islamic religion. And that frightens people, it frightens Israelis, it frightens American Jews. It seems to be something very old. What's important to know, and this is where a knowledge of history can play an important part in establishing lines of communication between people, understanding where this anti-Semitism comes from and how it is related to problems that exist in the present, can help people divest themselves of the belief that is an erratic thing. Now, disturbingly, equally disturbingly, on the other side, Jews, whether in Israel or outside of Israel, have developed attitudes towards Arabs and Muslims, and remember that not all Muslims are Arabs and not all Arabs are Muslims, which attitudes which are similar to the anti-Semitic attitudes that are rife in the Islamic world. These are attitudes that are prejudicial, that belittle Muslims. These attitudes may stem from great fear and a response to Muslim anti-Semitism, but it is nonetheless disturbing. It is, of course, energized by the general global Islamophobia that, in the United States at least, has accelerated since 9/11. It's important, and I think this book makes clear that neither of these two expressions, Muslim anti-Semitism or Jewish anti-Muslimism, and I would go so far as to call it that, need to be belong to, are deeply rooted in the respective religions. And historically, it just does not hold water. This and other issues of Muslim-Jewish relations are dealt with in this book, and I hope that it will get a wide audience here. I would just add one more thing. Independently, but in the same vein, during the last few years, while this book was in production, a film company in Paris was making a documentary called, in French, Juifs et Musulmans, si loin, si proche. Jews and Muslims, how so far, so close. And the English version is called Jews and Muslims, Intimate Strangers. In 4 episodes of approximately an hour each, it tells pretty much the same story that is told in this book. When the film company and the publisher of the book learned of each other's respective projects, they began to exchange ideas and cooperation, and there is an e-book version of the history of Jewish Muslim relations, which can be purchased, and in the e-book there are some visuals that are actually outtakes from the film version, not the film version, but the film that was being made there. So hopefully that film will also be shown in the United States. It's been already accepted in one film festival in Atlanta. I'm a talking head in the film, so are a dozen or so other people, Europeans, French, Israelis, all represent Muslims, of course. So with that said, I will conclude, I have to say, and we can proceed.